There comes a moment in life when a person stands at the edge of a dream, a hope, or a challenge and feels a familiar whisper rise inside them, the whisper that says, "I can't." It arrives quietly, yet it carries the strength to halt entire destinies. It convinces strong people to shrink, talented minds to stay silent, and capable hearts to never begin. But what if that whisper isn't truth? What if it is only the echo of fear, a memory of old wounds, a shadow that appears large only because you've never stepped close enough to see its real size? What if the limits you feel are not walls, but doors waiting for your hand to turn the handle? Imagine for a moment that every time you said, "I can't," life was holding something for you on the other side, new strength, new skill, new confidence, new possibility. Imagine how your story would change if you chose, just once, to challenge that whisper instead of obeying it. This speech is not about perfection. It is about awakening the part of you that is tired of being small, tired of waiting, tired of believing in limits that were never real. It is about beginning again with courage. The mind builds the road long before the feet ever touch it, and this truth becomes clearer each time a person confronts the quiet, heavy whisper of, "I can't." Long before our hands attempt a task, long before our feet step toward a challenge, long before our voices speak a dream out loud, the mind has already shaped the direction. It paints the landscape we move through, deciding whether the world is full of walls or full of openings. When someone carries a belief of limitation, every path feels steep, every possibility feels distant, and every step feels uncertain. This is why breaking the "I can't" mentality begins not in the outer world, but deep within the inner one, where thoughts take shape and transform into choices, actions, and eventually outcomes. The mind is the architect of every road we walk, and it builds according to what we believe about ourselves. Many people underestimate the invisible power of perception. When the mind believes something is impossible, it closes its doors, narrows its vision, and refuses to see solutions that may be standing right in front of it. A person can have talent, resources, and even opportunity, yet still remain stuck simply because their inner map tells them the path is too difficult to travel. On the other hand, when the mind opens to possibility, even in small, delicate ways, the world seems to expand. What once looked like a dead end begins to show cracks of light. What once felt uncertain begins to feel reachable. But this shift never happens by accident. It happens when a person becomes aware of the silent stories shaping their steps. Every limitation begins as a thought, often planted by fear, past experiences, or the opinions of others. Someone fails once and the mind quietly whispers, "Maybe this isn't for you." Someone hears a negative comment and the mind carves it into memory. Someone grows up in an environment where dreams are mocked, effort is questioned, or ambition is misunderstood, and without realizing it, they inherit a belief that effort will only end in disappointment. Over time, these subtle messages layer themselves into the deeper corners of the psyche until "I can't" feels like a fact, not a feeling. This is why breaking the belief requires an honest return to the root of the thought, where it began, how it grew, and why it still has power. The mind is not fixed, it is a landscape that can be reshaped. With every challenge a person accepts, with every small victory they allow themselves to recognize, the inner terrain changes. This reshaping does not need to happen all at once. It rarely does. It begins with questioning what once felt unquestionable. It begins with asking, is this truly impossible, or is it only unfamiliar? It begins with noticing the difference between danger and discomfort. Most of the time, "I can't" is not protection, it is hesitation disguised as certainty. And once a person sees that even faintly, the belief begins to crumble. There is a quiet moment in every journey, when someone realizes that the barrier they feared was only a shadow cast by doubt. The moment they take a step towards something they once believed they could not do, they discover the ground did not collapse beneath them. They discover their breath continues. They discover they can endure more than they imagined. Each step becomes proof. Each attempt becomes evidence. And gradually, The mind rewrites its story, not one of limitation, but one of possibility. When someone understands that the road is built by thought, they begin to treat their thoughts differently. Instead of accepting fear as truth, they examine it. Instead of letting doubt dictate the direction, they challenge it. Instead of surrendering to the first whisper of inadequacy, they learn to listen deeper, beneath the noise, where a quieter voice says, "Try." That small voice is the beginning of every transformation. It is the voice that builds new roads, roads that lead out of hesitation and into growth. Breaking the "I can't" mentality is not about forcing confidence. It is about reclaiming authorship of your inner world. It is about recognizing that the mind that once built walls can also build bridges. It is about understanding that the thoughts shaping your steps are not permanent. They are choices revisited so often that they began to feel like truth. And when you choose differently, when you decide to see possibility instead of impossibility, the path beneath your feet begins to change, revealing that the world was always wider than your fear. Fear often hides itself beneath the simple phrase, "I can't," and most people never look closely enough to see what is really happening beneath those words. When someone says they cannot do something, they are rarely speaking about their actual ability. They are speaking about an invisible barrier that rises inside them whenever they imagine stepping into something unfamiliar, challenging, or uncertain. This barrier is fear. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of disappointment, fear of the unknown. It disguises itself as limitation because limitation sounds logical, safe, and unquestionable. Fear, on the other hand, forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves, so the mind hides it behind the easier statement, "I just can't." But every fear carries a hidden door behind it, and once a person understands that, the phrase "I can't" loses the power it once held. Fear creates illusions that look like walls. It convinces you that the path ahead is blocked, that you are not prepared, that you are not strong enough, or that you are not worthy of the outcome you desire. These illusions feel real because the mind projects them with vivid detail, images of what could go wrong, memories of what went wrong before, and imagined voices of people who might disapprove or criticize. Because these images feel familiar and vivid, many people assume they are signs or warnings. In truth, they are echoes of past experiences, not predictions of future failure. Fear uses the past to distort the future, and unless a person recognizes the pattern, they remain trapped behind a door that was never truly locked. Every fear holds a doorway because fear is not meant to stop you. It is meant to signal that something on the other side carries meaning. We do not fear what does not matter to us. A person does not fear a challenge that has no potential to grow them. Fear arises precisely at the places where our potential expands beyond our comfort. It appears at the threshold of great change, standing like a guard at the gate. Many people see this guard and turn back, believing it is there to keep them out. But the truth is that fear is there to test how deeply you desire what you seek. It offers a choice: retreat into familiarity or step forward into possibility. When someone faces fear directly, they often discover that it begins to shrink. The shadows that once looked overwhelming become smaller, clearer, and less threatening when examined closely. This is because fear thrives in avoidance. The more you avoid a fear, the larger it grows in your imagination. But when you confront it, even with trembling hands, the mind begins to understand that the threat was exaggerated. The fear loses its authority, and the door behind it slowly begins to open. This opening reveals new perspectives, new strengths, and new paths that were hidden before. Real growth begins the moment a person realizes that fear is not the enemy. Fear is a signal that something valuable lies ahead, something that will stretch, strengthen, and evolve them. People often discover talents, dreams, and strengths not by walking around fear but by walking through it. The doorway behind fear leads to deeper self-knowledge because it forces a person to question their assumptions about themselves. It invites them to replace doubt with curiosity. What if I'm capable? What if this works? What might life look like if I try? Suddenly the world widens and possibilities that once felt impossible begin to feel reachable. Those who break the "I can't" mentality are not fearless. They are simply willing to approach fear with honesty rather than avoidance. They learn to sit with discomfort, to examine the story fear is telling them, and to choose movement despite uncertainty. This shift in relationship transforms fear from a barrier into a guide. Instead of saying, "I can't," they begin saying, "This scares me, but maybe it's worth trying." That change of thought is enough to unlock the door fear stands behind, revealing the wider landscape waiting on the other side. Once a person learns to walk through one door of fear, they realize that every future fear carries a similar structure, a barrier outside, a doorway inside, and a freedom beyond. Over time, the phrase, "I can't," becomes less and less believable because they have experienced its illusion too many times. They understand that the words were never a measure of their ability, only a reflection of their hesitation. And as hesitation dissolves, self-belief grows, leading them into spaces they once thought were unreachable. By recognizing the hidden doorway behind fear, a person begins to live life not as a prisoner of doubt, but as a seeker of possibility. They stop assuming that every challenge is a wall, and they begin testing the edges, pushing gently, courageously, until cracks of opportunity appear. Eventually, they learn that fear was never meant to stop them. It was meant to show them exactly where their next breakthrough waits. Great change is often imagined as a dramatic moment, a bold leap, or a sudden transformation, but in reality it rarely happens that way. Most lives are reshaped quietly in the small, almost unnoticeable acts of courage that accumulate over time. When a person feels trapped in the "I can't" mentality, they often assume they need one powerful moment to break free, a surge of confidence, a sudden burst of strength, or a perfect opportunity that will change everything at once. But real transformation does not wait for a perfect moment. It begins with the smallest choice a person makes in the direction of their potential. These small acts of courage become the seeds that redesign destiny. A small act of courage can look ordinary from the outside: waking up 10 minutes earlier, trying again after a small failure, asking a question you were afraid to ask, practicing a skill you feel clumsy at, taking one step toward a goal that overwhelms you. None of these moments feel heroic when they happen, but each one weakens the grip of "I can't." Each one challenges the belief that you are powerless or limited. The mind begins to recognize a new pattern: movement instead of avoidance, effort instead of surrender, possibility instead of hesitation. Over time, this pattern becomes a new identity grounded not in fear, but in resilience. People often underestimate these small acts because they seem too simple, too quiet, too slow. But the most powerful transformations are born from consistency, not intensity. A single workout does not transform the body, but a habit of movement does. A single page written does not produce a book, but writing a little each day does. A single moment of confidence does not eliminate doubt, but repeatedly showing up despite insecurity slowly dissolves the belief that you are incapable. Courage grows the way trees grow, gradually, silently, and through repeated exposure to the light. And just like trees, the roots strengthen long before the branches appear. Many people remain stuck because they wait for courage to feel big before they act. But courage rarely feels big at the beginning. It feels shaky, uncomfortable, and uncertain. Yet even shaky courage is powerful because it shifts momentum. The first step is always the hardest because it breaks the cycle of inaction. Once movement begins, the next step becomes more familiar, more possible, more natural. Every small courageous act sends a message to the mind: I am capable of doing hard things. That message slowly overwrites the old belief of "I can't." Small acts of courage also build trust within yourself. Each time you keep a promise, no matter how small, you prove to yourself that you can rely on your own effort and commitment. This self-trust is essential because without it, doubt grows stronger. Doubt thrives in the absence of evidence, but courage provides evidence. Even if the result is imperfect, even if the action feels clumsy, the simple fact that you tried becomes proof that you are not as limited as you once believed. Over time, this proof becomes the foundation of inner strength. Real-life examples are everywhere. Think of a person who once feared public speaking but forced themselves to say a few sentences in a meeting. Over weeks or months, those few sentences grow into full contributions. Eventually, speaking becomes second nature. It wasn't one moment that transformed them, but many small, uncomfortable moments of choosing courage. Think of someone learning a new skill, code, art, fitness, language. The first attempts feel awkward, maybe even embarrassing. But once they commit to small, steady effort, they surprise themselves with how much progress is possible. Again, it wasn't a surge of confidence, but the accumulation of many small decisions to keep going. The beauty of small acts of courage is that they demand nothing extraordinary, just a willingness to take one step instead of none. They do not require perfection or even certainty. They only require movement. When you take these small steps consistently, the mind gradually shifts from resisting challenge to embracing it. The belief changes from, I can't do this, to, maybe I can learn this, and eventually to, I am doing this. The world responds to this shift. Opportunities open. Strength increases. Confidence grows. But these outcomes begin with the smallest of beginnings. Destiny is not rewritten through sudden bursts of bravery. It is rewritten through the everyday courage to try, to learn, to continue, to rise again. Each small act becomes a thread, and over time, these threads weave a new story about who you are and who you are becoming. The person who once felt trapped by, I can't, wakes one day to discover that their actions have built a life shaped by persistence, resilience, and quiet strength. And it all began with those small, private decisions that seemed insignificant at the time, but held the power to transform everything. Doubt has a way of entering the mind like an unexpected storm, loud and unsettling, shaking even the strongest intentions with its persistent voice. It speaks in sharp whispers, reminding you of every mistake you have made and every moment you hesitated. It exaggerates your weaknesses and minimizes your strengths. Meanwhile, the truth within you is quieter, steady like a calm river moving underneath the noise. The truth does not shout, it does not demand attention, it simply waits. And in the battle between the loud voice of doubt and the steady truth of your capability, most people listen to what makes the most noise rather than what carries the most wisdom. This is why so many remain stuck in the I can't mentality, not because they lack ability, but because doubt knows how to speak loudly enough to drown out everything else. The loudness of doubt comes from familiarity. It is built from the collection of past failures, painful memories, criticisms you absorbed, and fears that grew roots inside you over the years. Doubt does not need to invent anything new. It simply replays the moments that once hurt you. It reminds you of the time you tried and didn't succeed, the time someone laughed at your dreams, the time you struggled and felt embarrassed. Because these memories carry emotion, they echo with power. The mind naturally pays more attention to what feels threatening, and doubt uses that instinct to control your choices. The louder doubt becomes, the more convincing it sounds. But loud does not mean true. Truth often moves slowly, quietly, waiting beneath the surface for a moment of awareness. It does not need noise because truth is rooted in your actual potential, not your imagined limitations. The truth is that you have overcome difficulties before. The truth is that you have learned new skills, adapted to new environments, healed from painful experiences, and risen after disappointments. You have already proven strength many times, but the mind often forgets victories faster than failures. Success becomes a brief moment while mistakes leave long shadows. That imbalance gives doubt the power to distort your sense of identity. To break the I can't mentality, a person must learn to recognize the difference between the loudness of doubt and the steadiness of truth. Doubt speaks in absolutes. You always fail. You're not good enough. You'll never succeed. Truth speaks in possibilities. You can learn. You can grow. You can try again. Doubt sees the world through a narrow lens that highlights what could go wrong, while truth sees a wider landscape where effort and resilience shape outcomes. The challenge is not that truth is absent, it is that doubt's noise makes it harder to hear. People who learn to break this mentality begin by pausing when doubt speaks. Instead of immediately believing every fearful thought, they observe it, they question it, they ask, is this really true? Or is this just fear repeating an old story? That simple moment of awareness creates space for truth to emerge, space for possibility to return, space for a different choice to be made. In that space, a person can recall past strengths, current abilities, and future potential. Suddenly, doubt loses some of its authority because it is no longer the only voice being heard. Another way truth becomes stronger is through action. The moment you take even one step towards something you fear, doubt begins to lose credibility. It can shout all it wants, but when your actions contradict its predictions, the mind begins to shift. If doubt says you can't, and you take a small step anyway, you are giving yourself evidence that its voice is unreliable. Each action becomes a counter-argument. Over time, your mind gathers enough proof to challenge doubt automatically, transforming the relationship you have with difficult tasks. Truth gains strength through repetition. Every day you choose effort over avoidance, learning over fear, and improvement over stagnation. The inner voice of truth grows quieter but stronger. It will never be loud, because truth does not rely on noise, it relies on substance. It becomes a steady anchor, something you feel rather than hear, something you trust even when emotions fluctuate. People who succeed are not those who silence doubt completely, they are those who learn to let truth guide them despite doubt's noise. Eventually, the "I can't" mentality fades not because doubt disappears, but because it loses its power to direct your steps. You learn to hear it without obeying it, to feel it without surrendering to it. You begin to trust the steadier, quieter truth inside you, the truth that you are capable of more than your fears have allowed you to believe. You discover that doubt was loud only because you listened closely, but the truth was strong because it was real. Possibility does not reveal itself to those who stand still. It unfolds only for those who dare to move, even when the direction is unclear, even when the outcome is uncertain, even when their hands tremble from the weight of doubt. The mind often waits for perfect clarity before taking action, hoping for a sign, a guarantee, or a promise that everything will work out. But growth does not happen under the conditions of certainty. It happens in the friction between courage and fear, between hesitation and movement. The journey ahead begins not when everything makes sense, but when you choose to take the first step without knowing exactly how the path will unfold. The first step is the most powerful moment in any transformation because it breaks the inertia that keeps a person trapped in the "I can't" mentality. Inaction strengthens doubt. The longer someone waits, the heavier the hesitation becomes. But one small step, even an imperfect one, disrupts the pattern. It sends a message to the mind that movement is possible, that effort can exist even without full confidence. That single step becomes the foundation on which all future steps can be built. It may not be dramatic or noticeable to others, but to the person taking it, it becomes a declaration of willingness to try. People often underestimate how much courage the first step demands because it requires faith before evidence. It requires trusting that the ground will meet your foot even when you cannot see the full path. This trust is not blind, it is rooted in the understanding that clarity comes through experience. You learn the way by walking it. You understand the path by moving through it. You gain confidence by acting, not by waiting for confidence to arrive on its own. The path never reveals its details to those who refuse to move. It waits for your footsteps to awaken it. Think about the times in life when you finally decided to try something new, learning a skill, starting a project, stepping into a relationship, changing a habit, or pursuing a dream. Before you took that first step, everything felt uncertain. Questions filled your mind. What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? What if this doesn't work? But once you acted, once you began, the questions did not disappear, but they grew quieter because your focus shifted from imagining difficulties to engaging with the process. Action turns fear into something manageable, something you can work with. Standing still leaves you trapped in the endless cycle of what if, but movement grounds you in what is. The first step also invites the world to respond. Life has a way of opening doors only after you begin walking toward them. Opportunities appear that you could not see from a distance. People come into your life who were invisible before. Strength emerges from within you that you did not know existed. But none of this is visible until you move. The path meets you halfway, but only after you've shown that you are willing to walk your part of it. Staying still closes every possibility. Moving, even slowly, ignites momentum. There is also an unseen psychological power behind the first step. When you take action towards something meaningful, you shift your identity from someone who dreams to someone who does. This shift is subtle but transformative. You begin to see yourself as capable rather than limited, as evolving rather than stuck. That new sense of identity becomes fuel for further progress. Each step reinforces the belief that you can handle more than you once thought. Confidence grows not from success alone, but from proving to yourself that you are willing to try. Real growth rarely happens in straight lines. The path may curve, twist, or lead you through moments of difficulty, but once you are moving, you learn to adjust. You learn to navigate. You learn to adapt. Motion invites insight, and insight strengthens resilience. Standing still, on the other hand, keeps you in the same place with the same thoughts and the same fears. Nothing changes because nothing has been tested. The beauty of the first step is that it requires no perfection, only intention. It does not ask you to know the whole journey, only to begin it. It does not demand mastery on the first day. It asks for willingness. A person who trusts the process enough to take the first step discovers that the journey itself becomes the teacher. What felt impossible becomes manageable. What seemed far becomes reachable. What once looked overwhelming becomes part of your story of growth. Breaking the "I can't" mentality is never about instantly becoming fearless. It is about choosing movement despite fear, one step at a time. The moment you step forward, something shifts inside you. You open the door for possibility to walk in. The path that once seemed invisible begins to unfold under your feet, not because the world suddenly changed, but because you finally moved toward what was waiting for you all along. Belief is one of the most powerful forces shaping human identity, and whether someone realizes it or not, their beliefs act like silent architects of their future. A person becomes what they repeatedly believe, because belief influences perception. Perception influences choices, and choices shape outcomes. The "I can't" mentality survives not because a person is truly incapable, but because they have rehearsed that belief for so long that it feels like truth. The mind grows accustomed to its own stories, and when those stories are repeated enough times, they begin to sculpt how a person acts, reacts, and sees themselves. Breaking this mentality requires more than changing external habits. It demands shifting the beliefs that live at the core of one's identity. From childhood onward, people absorb beliefs from experiences, environments, and the voices around them. A careless comment from a teacher, a moment of embarrassment in front of peers, a failure that felt too heavy, a comparison that stung. These moments carve themselves into memory and become the soil from which self-beliefs grow. When these experiences go unchallenged, they transform into internal rules. I'm not good at this. I always fail. I'm not talented enough. Someone like me can't succeed. These statements are not facts, yet the mind treats them as if they are unchangeable laws. Over time, these beliefs shape behavior. A person avoids challenges, hesitates to try new things, and interprets every setback as confirmation of their limitations. They unknowingly become the person their beliefs insist they are. But just as limiting beliefs are learned, empowering beliefs can be learned too. Breaking the "I can't" mentality begins with recognizing that belief is not a fixed entity. It is flexible, adaptable, responsive to evidence and repetition. Every time you choose a new belief, even one as simple as, I am learning, or I can improve, you begin rewriting your internal script. These new beliefs may feel weak or unfamiliar at first, but with repetition they gain strength. The mind does not care whether a belief is empowering or limiting. It simply amplifies what you repeat. This is why the shift begins with language. Changing the things you tell yourself changes the way you experience the world. Replacing I can't with I will try, I am learning, or I will grow may seem like small adjustments, but these shifts act like seeds planted in the mind. With time, they take root. Belief influences action, and through action, the new belief gains evidence. A person who once believed they could never speak confidently tries to speak once, stumbles, but survives the moment. They try again, and it goes a little better. Gradually, the belief shifts from, I can't speak, to, I'm improving, to, I can do this. None of this happens suddenly. It happens through the repeated cycle of new belief leading to new action leading to new evidence, and new evidence strengthening the new belief. There is a psychological truth behind this process. The brain is wired to look for evidence that supports what it already believes. This is why someone with the I can't mentality constantly notices reasons to quit, setbacks that confirm their fears, and failures that seem to reinforce their limitations. On the other hand, a person who believes they are capable begins noticing opportunities, progress, and moments of success. The same world presents two different realities depending on the belief lens through which it is seen. Changing the lens changes everything. Identity and belief are deeply connected. When someone says, I can't, they are not just describing an action, they are describing who they think they are. To break this mindset, a person must separate temporary struggle from permanent identity. Struggling with something does not make you incapable. Failing at something does not define your worth. Being unfamiliar with a skill does not mean you will never master it. Identity should be shaped by growth, not by fear. And as soon as a person allows themselves to believe in growth, their identity begins to expand. The transformation becomes visible when someone consistently chooses beliefs that support their potential. They start acting differently. They take more risks, explore new paths, and treat setbacks as lessons rather than confirmations of inadequacy. Their world begins to shift because their internal landscape has changed. People around them notice the difference, not because the person suddenly gained new abilities, but because they stopped limiting their abilities through belief. The mind that once closed doors now begins to open them, simply because it is no longer driven by the belief that those doors are locked. Ultimately, you become what you continue to believe. If you feed your mind with doubt, it will build a life that reflects fear. If you feed it with possibility, it will build a life that reflects hope. The difference between someone who rises and someone who stays stuck is not talent, luck, or opportunity, it is belief. And the moment you choose to believe in growth over limitation, the I can't mentality loses its power, allowing you to step into a version of yourself that was waiting beneath the doubt all along. In the end, breaking the I can't mentality is not a single moment of awakening, but a quiet rebellion carried out in the heart, step by step, belief by belief, breath by breath. It is the journey of someone who finally understands that the battles holding them back were never fought in the world around them, but in the thoughts they carried within. When you confront fear, you discover the doorway behind it. When you take small acts of courage, you reshape your destiny. When doubt grows loud, you learn to lean into the steady truth beneath it. When the path seems invisible, you take the first trembling step and watch it unfold. And when you begin to believe in your own growth, truly believe, your entire life expands to meet the new horizon your mind finally allows. The person who once whispered, I can't, becomes the person who learns, grows, and rises in ways they once thought were beyond reach. This transformation is not loud or dramatic, it is gentle, patient, and profoundly human. It is the story of someone choosing to become more than their fear, more than their past, more than their doubt. It is the story of someone discovering that they were capable all along. They simply needed to begin. Good luck on your journey of becoming stronger than every barrier you once believed in. Thank you for listening, and may your path forward be filled with courage, clarity, and the quiet confidence that you can.